I'm so delighted to welcome you to today's virtual event, The Art of Freelancing, a conversation on how to launch your brand. This session is being recorded, and it's part of a series of wonderful virtual events that COM has been running through this spring on Zoom, bringing together experts to talk about how professionals are approaching communication in a world shaped by the coronavirus. In a moment, I'll read the speaker bios, and then I'll introduce Jay Atkinson, who is going to be moderating today. Please remember to only put your questions in the Q&A, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. Now, let me formally introduce our speakers and read their bios to you. And then after that, I'll turn it over to Jay. So first, I should mention Jay Atkinson. Jay Atkinson's book, Massacre on the Merrimack, received the 2016 Massachusetts Book Award honors in nonfiction. He's the author of 2 novels, a story collection, and 5 narrative nonfiction books. His freelance clients include the New York Times, Men's Health, Boston Magazine, Runner's World, Backpacker, Newsday, Portland Oregonian, Boston Globe Magazine, and many others. Jay is a lecturer at the College of Communication. Now I'm going to turn to Greg Marinovich. By the way, when I say your name, maybe just put your hand up so folks can see you.
That was me.
Born in South Africa in 1962, Greg is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative photojournalist and co-author of The Bang Bang Club, as well as Murder at Small Copy, that was awarded the Alan Paton Prize for Nonfiction in 2017. His latest book is Shots from the Edge. Greg is a master lecturer in the journalism department at COM. Next, turning to Mary Jane Doherty. Mary Jane Doherty trained at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she produced Gravity, a film about experimental astrophysicists, and freelanced for Northern Light Productions, Black Side, and Vita Health, Inc. She now teaches film production courses as an associate professor in the film and television department, while solo shooting and directing non-academic films about astrophysics, the arts, especially the Cuban ballet program, and music education. And now turning to Pegeen Ryan. Pegeen Ryan joined the College of Communication as an associate professor of the practice in advertising after working on the creative side of the advertising business for 30 years. Pegeen started as an art director, rising to VP creative director at various Boston ad agencies. She spent a large portion of her career at Digitas, where she was creative director on major brands such as P&G, the Home Depot, GM, and Gillette. She's won numerous awards, including a Cannes, MITx, Echo, and Hatch. Still active in the industry, she does creative direction and art direction for her own clients. Pegeen teaches creative and portfolio development, and undergraduate students. Seem to have a bit of a tongue twister problem today. Anyway, thank you so much. And now I'll turn it over to Jay Atkinson as our moderator. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Dean D. Christina. And thanks to all the panelists and all the visitors that are with us today. And it reminds me, this forum is perfect as a reminder that at the College of Communication, storytelling, good storytelling and creativity never takes a vacation. We're working right through this, and we're finding a way to get some of our instruction and some of our advice out to the public as well as our students. You know, I know from getting emails and text messages over the last few days that there's many familiar faces out in that audience, students and recent former students, like call them the usual suspects. I ask that you please restrict your wisecracks to the, to the chat function. And also, we're continuing a conversation that started maybe a year and a half ago between journalism chair Bill McKean and I over creating this freelancing course in the journalism program. And now, through this forum and through the Dean's Initiative, we're broadening it out to all the different departments in COM. So we can all talk about what storytellers need to do in our different disciplines to make an impact in the creative world. So it's my pleasure to introduce first my colleague Pegeen Ryan, who's been teaching at BU for 8 years, but she's also been working on the creative side of the advertising business for the last 30 years. I also find interesting, I think she's going to mention that you know, she's won several prestigious awards, as Mariette just pointed out, and now her students are following in their mentors' footsteps, which shows that the faculty at the College of Communication is made up of active storytellers who are able, through instruction and hortatory exertion, to get some of the things across to the students that they need to know to be professionals. So thank you, Pegeen, for joining us, and love to hear your talk.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Mariette. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. So I'm going to get right into it and share my screen here. And I hope everyone can see this okay. I'm getting a little thing that says my internet is unstable. Hope that's not the case. So as Mariette and Jay said, I come at this from the advertising world, and specifically the creative side of the advertising world. And I think right now, actually, as kind of dim as some things in advertising are looking, I think actually this could be a really optimistic time to become a freelancer or to enhance your freelance business if you're already doing some. As we all know, and I imagine there's folks on the call that have been affected by this, a lot of people are being laid off, which is terrible, but in terms of freelancing, it can actually sometimes open up opportunities. And I think as things start to get back to a little more normal, my guess anxious to employ freelancers, probably more so than bringing on big salaries again. But to me, more importantly, that's sort of the agency side of things. I think when you think about freelance, if you think about smaller companies that are dealing with their customers in a completely different way, and we're all interacting, you know, so much more online, so much more through email. Obviously, we can't be going into places physically. So social media, online marketing, not that they weren't king before, but I think they're double king right now. And to me, for freelance, smaller businesses have always been sort of the low-hanging fruit. And I think that's the place where you as marketers and creative folks can really help businesses to reinvent themselves and how they're talking to customers. And I think especially younger marketers and creatives, which I kind of assume position right now, you understand how to communicate, you understand the social space, you live and breathe it, you get marketing, and you have to keep remembering you have skills that places like these smaller companies, they're worried about running their business. They're not necessarily focused on how do I speak to my customers. So you have the opportunity to reach out and help position them to win during this time. So I wanted to tell you a little story that happened literally in the last week and a half. And Melody is, I don't think she's on this call, but if she is, we'll hear from her later. She's a comm student. She just finished up. She just graduated. She was in my portfolio class in the spring. She actually had started out as an account person and switched over kind of later in her college career to be a creative. And good thing she did, because she's awesome. So this is what happened to Melody literally between the time school ended 2 weeks ago and today. So in 7 days, she started an Instagram account called Album Receipts, which is just what it sounds like. She took albums and she made them into receipts. Why? I don't know, but it's cool. You know, it's good content. And so at the time I did a screenshot of this, she had like 45 of these things done. And you see one blown up here. And so, you know, list all the songs, list the amount of time that it is they take. And at the bottom, it gives all sorts of credits to who worked on it. So she puts this up and she's kind of doing it as much as anything to just make something and, you know, get it out there and kind of be creative and have a good time. So I know this is a lot of words and I'm going to go through it quickly, but it sort of mimics how it actually happened in real life. It happened really quickly. So day 1, she launches Album Receipts. Day 3, she creates an album receipt for Smino's Noir. So this catches the attention of Smino and his agency EQT. If you don't know who EQT is, I didn't either, but it's a kind of boutique subset of Universal Music Group, who I'm sure we've all heard of. So then she notices Smino's producers are reposting her work on their Instagram stories. So she decides, smart, to make more album receipts of artists that their agency represents. She's already got there. At which point, the manager messages her and said, would you like to lead creative direction on EQT's social branding? So somewhere in this space, I got a quick call from her. They said, help. I don't know what's going on. This is taking off really quickly. So we talked about it. We kind of broke it down into, manageable chunks that she could take on as freelance. Then by day 5, she'd all of a sudden reached 10,000 followers. And now she's contacted by the digital product marketing director of Interscope. So will she produce receipts for their records? And by the way, up in the Smino part, they weren't looking for receipts. They just really liked the way she thought and the way she designed. They were just looking for her to redo their social branding. So anyway, back on day 5, now she's hearing from Rich Music Label, see if she could work with them on an upcoming freelance project. Keshi, I hope I'm saying that right, Keshi's agent saw her work, shared it. So suddenly the label that signed him, Tier 1 Collective, reaches out to her, asks if she could design a logo for them. By day 6, Casey Musgraves shares her work on Instagram and Twitter. Now she's hit 13.5 thousand followers, and she's contacted by the digital manager of Def Jam Records and Noise for potential freelance opportunities there. Day 7, which was Friday, she had back-to-back meetings with T1C, Interscope, Def Jam, and Noise, and her account had hit 20,000 followers. So I reached out to her yesterday and I said, I have this thing I'm gonna do tomorrow, so you want to give me any other further updates? And she's like, oh yeah, well, by the way, Ariana Grande shared my work. And so my account just shot up to 30.5 thousand followers. And now I also got contacted by MTV and 88 Rising. So that was a busy week, right? Like kind of amazing. She, her jaw is still, but she's working through it and she's figuring it out. So where do you start? 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure I would have said, make cool stuff and get it out there would have been my first bullet on this list. But it is right now, because the more I thought about it and just watching what happened with, content is so important, and we are all on social media so much more than we even were. So if you have the ability to make cool stuff, you make cool stuff, and more importantly, be smart like she was smart, and get that kind of that viral storm going. Now, is this a guarantee that you're going to make an Instagram account and this is going to happen? Absolutely not. It's like an agency coming to someone and saying, and put it out there, but there's other things that go into it, and one of them is timing and luck. So anyway, I think it's pretty cool way to think about, geez, how could I get started on this? And then other ways are much more traditional. This freelancing is, to me, not that job. Network in the traditional ways, use LinkedIn, reconnect with people from past jobs and internships and whatnot. But I think the one that's always worked best for me is the third one, which is just chat it up with people, because I think in all my years of freelancing, which I've done when I'm working in an agency on the side, and also I did exclusively, I ran my own thing for 5 or 6 years before I started teaching at BU. Almost no freelance job came just sort of cold or out of the blue. It was almost always someone I knew, a neighbor, a friend, a business, somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody that knew me. So small to start out with, whether it's just, the veterinarian you've used down the street for your pet for your whole life, or, the person that cuts your hair, or the restaurant that you love that is like dealing with a lot of stuff right now because they're dealing with things in a totally different way. So that's my story about Melody. I just wanted to get things rolling with that. I want to turn it back over to the other folks to make sure everybody gets plenty of time. And we can come back and talk in Q&A. And if in Q&A, these are a few things that I think, if you're interested in the creative side of advertising and freelancing, are good things to think about talking about, which is, not just doing it solo, but building your team, the different kinds of freelance you can have, projects versus clients versus agencies, pricing and bartering is a whole thing. And I can tell you my bartering story later, and just general pros and cons of the freelance world. So I'm going to unshare and turn it back over to Jay, and I will meet you again back in the chat and Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you, Pegeen. Next up is Mary Jane Doherty. And I want to just mention 2 of her current projects. In 2020, she will finish and release a film called Let the River Run, which is about the Boston Children's Chorus. And then her other project, which is fascinating to me, is The Fishing Widows of Bay St. Lawrence, a combination prose and film essay about a group of fishing widows in a remote part of Nova Scotia. Well, I went to Acadia University in Nova Scotia for undergrad. I lived there roughly 4.5 years, and I met people from those remote parts of Nova Scotia, and I know this project is going to be fascinating. So after a long conversation with Mary Jane the other day, I'm happy to introduce her as iconoclast, innovator, and truth teller, my kind of person. Go ahead, Mary Jane.
Okay, thank you, Jay, for that, and thank you, everybody. So what I'm going to do today is show you 3 case studies. And the reason I'm showing you 3, for 3 different reasons. One is that the trajectories are all different. And that means your freelance trajectory may be different too. There really isn't a right way for this. There's your way. You have to know who you are as a person. So maybe you'll connect with one of these 3 ways. Also, quickly, in the world of filmmaking, just to get you started, Boston is a doc town, LA is for features, New York is for independent films. So at least get yourself situated in the right city. And the third thing I want to show with these different case histories is that even though they're different, they all have something in common. So I'm going to share, and here we go. My first, here's my Fishing Widows boots. What about that for a brand picture, Pegeen? Okay, hang on. Sandra. Sandra graduated with me from MIT. Sorry, I gotta go to the whiteboard. And this is her trajectory. This is her freelancing career. We are talking decades. And then all of a sudden, 2 decades later, Sandra might have been the worst editor I've ever met in my life. I love her. She's an incredible person. She did not know how to edit. I had to teach her one-on-one, long story. But she is an editor for a certain kind of film. And the thing, the takeaway for Sandra is she's a wonderful person. And she hung in. She wanted to be an editor, and she did. And it took decades. So she's an extreme example, but I swear to God, maybe Pegeen and Greg can refute this, but I swear to God, if you hang in there, that line will eventually tick upward. Next case, Allie. Allie graduated from Harvard. You heard of Harvard? It's a good school. You know, okay school. Allie graduated from Harvard in about 2000, and she is now Boston's top girl DP. DP means cinematographer. Besides me, I would be up there with her, but she does a whole lot better job of social media than I do. So she's a fantastic cinematographer. She's now shooting for HBO, Nat Geo, Morgan Spurlock, Greta Gerwig, heard of her? Allie has shot for everybody. She's an incredible cinematographer. Here is her trajectory. Waves, hills and valleys, and the waves just simply got closer. Now the fact is, that's how Allie described her trajectory to me, is that it's a series of waves. But in fact, the truth is her waves increase. Allie is so humble, that she has not even recognized her own success. And this points to something, which is that, okay, what Allie did was she cobbled together. The waves means that she cobbled together freelancing work, teaching, a few salaried jobs, and bit by bit made her way. The mistake that she said that she made, and she wants me to share with you, is to listen to the advice that you should only do what you want to be. So if you want to be a cinematographer, the advice is don't take any other jobs because you'll get pigeonholed. Allie said, wrong. Take every job. Do everything, because the truth is, and this is a big secret, but actually Pegeen also talked about it. People want to work with you on the set because of who you are as a person. And the word gets out. You can be incredible with social media. And Allie, who hires now herself, Allie says, look, I am looking for the curious person, not necessarily the best and most skilled, but the person who says, honestly, I actually don't know the answer, but I'll learn and I'll help and I'll figure it out. Allie says, I want to hang out with these people. And when word gets out that you're somebody on set to hang out with, you got a job. So, fix your personality. Here's who you need to be. Humble, but not humble brag. You got to find that very fine line between humility, willing to learn, know that you don't know everything, and confidence. You got to find the line between the two. You got to be striving and saying, what is next? What can I learn? Where can I go? This is the person that people want on the set. And her takeaway is you need to be a good person. You need to ride those waves, but then have a long-term plan. But you need to be a good person. You need to care about others. Third case, Joshua graduated from Boston University, 2005. His trajectory. I have to change colors for Joshua. This is Joshua. In 2005, he bolts out of school. Boop, right away. Plateaus. Boop, plateaus. Boop, plateaus. That's 15 years with 2 plateaus. What did Josh do when he bolted out of BU? Now this is something pretty important for you all. Just got to show you Josh's lovely picture. I taught Josh, and I had no idea he was as brilliant as he turned out to be. Josh now is shooting for Morgan Spurlock. He has made 2 feature films. The last 12 documentaries he shot for were nominated for Oscars. He is the go-to DP in New York and now LA. What did Josh do? Time-wise, am I okay?
Yes.
What did Josh do? When he left BU 2005, he, first of all, wrangled all of his professors. Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? And he took a list, a massive list, and he called every single one of those contacts, not missing one. Then he followed up. Then he went to their house. Then he followed up. Then he wrote a thank you note to the people that he met. He did everything those first 3 years. He schlepped equipment around. He cleaned lenses. He PA'd on the set. He cleaned out the basement of a famous cinematographer's house. He did everything in the world. Why? Because just like Allie, he had to get his name out there, and he did. And people, I heard about him all the time. People kept calling me, do you know this Josh? Do you know this Josh? Do you? And I said, yeah, hire him. 3 years, he's got the big gigs. He plateaus though, and you reach a certain point, and when you reach a plateau, you've got to find a way to get yourself off. And what he did was shoot his own feature film, which got him into South by Southwest, which is a good festival, but not the festival, but it gave him enough credibility to move on to the next stage. And the next stage was high-end cinematography jobs. And then he shot his own feature in 2018, which went Menashe. Check it out, look it up. It went to Berlin, Sundance, Venice, not Venice, Toronto. It went to the top film festivals in the world. So now Joshua is a bona fide director as well as a cinematographer. So in other words, you can get onto these plateaus, but unless you make your own work or do something different, you might get stuck. So have in your mind, you know, if you want to be a filmmaker, don't let go of that dream. Josh didn't. And now he's, you know, he puts it this way, I'm in a good place. I'm not exactly where I want to be. This is 15 years out, but at least I have 2 features under my belt and I am shooting the kinds of films I want to shoot. But I'm going to go back to one little thing that Josh mentioned to me because it kind of freaks me out. A BU kid comes to New York and asks him for some advice. Josh spent 60 minutes with him, gave him leads, gave him inside tips, gave him special names. You know, he gave him advice that if you were a lawyer, you could charge $750. That kid did not write one word back to Josh. Not one word. After Josh spent an hour with him. Nothing. No email. Thanks, Josh. Nothing. That kid has no prospect of a future in New York. I'm saying this because it kind of freaks me out. And the kid will never get a job in New York. So is your freelance career as dependent on you writing a thank you note or not? Is it something that simple? You know what? It reflects something bigger. It reflects who you are as a person, which brings me back to the common denominator. If you care about other people, are willing to learn, that means receive information instead of pushing it out, me. But no, how can I help? You're the kind of person who respects others, who writes thank you notes, you're going to get the job. Be a good person. Am I done, Josh? I mean, Jay?
Yeah, let's go to Greg. Thanks. Because we're going to have time for questions too about filmmaking from the
Sorry if
audience.
I took too much time.
No, it's fine. We have plenty of time. So Greg Marinovich, I often stop him in the hallways at COM to see if I can get a couple minutes to talk storytelling and or rugby with him. And he's always willing to do so. I'm deep into his new book right now, Shots from the Edge, a photojournalist's encounters with conflict and resilience. And I was particularly taken because I already knew he was a talented photographer, photojournalist, visual storyteller. I didn't realize what an accomplished writer he was. And somewhere in the early chapters, he conducts this interview with a young Somali fighter who had killed several men nightmares. And he said, I dream about what I have passed through. I do not like the dreams. I like peace, but it will be as Allah says. And I thought that was very touching, and it reminded me in a very concrete way of sort of the sine qua non of this kind of book about conflict, Michael Herr's famous book, Dispatches, about the Vietnam War. This book made me feel, and I'm not through with the book yet, but it makes me feel the same way I was feeling when I read Michael Herr's Dispatches for the first time. And that was given to me by my writing teacher, iconic writing teacher, Harry Cruz at the University of Florida. And I can't wait to hear what Greg has to share with us all. Greg?
We can't hear you.
Not getting your audio, Greg.
He has to unmute.
Yes, thank you. I switched it off so I wouldn't be rattling away with the mouse. Thank you, Jay. You've set me up for failure, absolutely, with that.
No, for success, my friend.
So, and I think I just loved listening to Pegeen and Mary Jane about the different approaches and different thought patterns. So I'd like to just concentrate on the one side that we don't overlap with each other. And that's really, is that the field is very crowded. The field is very competitive. There are fantastic and talented people out there. Some of them are nice, like Mary Jane and her friends. Some of them are really not. And they'll step on you to get to the top. So how do you stand out from that crowd, and how do you make something your own? And I'll come in and out of sharing various screens, and which I have to put my glasses on for. So this is a screen of early black and white images that I was doing in South Africa. And I was following my passion, which was trying to expose what apartheid was doing in the rural areas. I was a very mediocre photographer. I was starting out. I really didn't know, but I was passionate, and I gave it time and time and time. And I think time is one of those things that's really important. And slowly I got onto more direct storytelling. And just like Mary Jane and Pegeen said, you build your contacts, you start building your reputation. People start feeling that you have integrity, that you have a sense of what story you're telling. And obviously this is a story that is about my own backyard. And I think it's important to A, tell wild and exotic stories, and B, to tell stuff that you really, really know about, that you can dig in deep. And trigger warning, there's some violent images coming up, and you'll see them as they go. Just close your eyes if you don't want to see it. I won't dwell on those very long. And so, you know, I wasn't even a professional photojournalist. I was a copy editor to make a living. When I came across this murder scene, which I photographed, and I took it in, and I started working with the Associated Press and with Sigma, which was this big French agency at the time. And so I was off and running as a photojournalist, and you know, building friendships and relationships, and thinking that this was my future, this is how it's going to be. But obviously, you know, the world changed. We went from film to digital. We went from paying lots of money for journalists and photographers to do particular stories, and the skills were slightly rarefied, not terribly, but enough that you could narrow it down and have work, into this generation now, which you guys face, where many employers don't really care about the quality, they just want the content. So how do you stand out in that crowd? And I think while the delivery method has changed and the competitive forums have changed, I think that you have to be passionate and do stories that you care about, because that's what's going to make you stand out from the person who spent a week on a story, is when you've spent 6 months on a story and it rock and roll. So the first book that I did as a consequence of the work was The Bang Bang Club. And that's the silly later reprint with the movie, with the still from the movie. And that was bought up and made into a feature film, which is quite awful, but it was good branding for me and for the movie and for Joao and for the story in itself. And that led to other kinds of work, doing documentary work, doing more writing. But I must say that the effort and the kind of emotional exposure in doing that book put me off writing anything major for a while. It took me quite some time to come around. The next book was inadvertent. I'd given up doing conflict and stuff, but then the Marikana massacre happened in South Africa. And I happened to cover some of it. And then I really got into it because it was this absolute police cover-up of their massacre of striking mine workers. Long story, I won't go into it. That led to a year of work and investigative journalism, and that led to the book. It also led to me coming to Harvard as a fellow, and then coming here to BU. Standing in for one of the professors who was on sabbatical. And so much like Mary Jane spoke about those trajectories, you have to look at where the opportunities are and be open to changing what you do as long as you're true to the things that you love. So while I was here at BU, I was doing various things. I finished a second book, a third book, and then I had to deliver this book that was really about my mother's story, which was quite remarkable. She was married to this, to a very infamous murderer in South Africa. It was her first marriage. She was 18, and it was quite dreadful. She obviously wasn't murdered, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But she managed to escape, and you know, I only found out about the story after her death. I found the investigating officer. It was this amazing story, but it was too much. I've spent 20 years trying to write it. I haven't finished. I don't know how to finish it. So I had a commission to do 2 books. I had to do something. I had to make business, right? So I did this one, which is the one that Jay's reading. And that's a collection of short stories, which all just have a picture as an opener for the chapter. And then that we talk about that particular chapter. And this is really about reutilizing material that you've done. All that work was done, all those experiences were gained, well, 90% of them were gained doing other work, either on assignment or projects of my own, and keeping the notebooks and keeping the film and keeping all the information about these things that you can recycle this. And that's a very effective way to run a business, is to have material that you can use in various and different ways. How are we doing with time, Jay?
Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, so what this led to was me starting to digitize my entire archive, not just the selects I'd done, but the entire archive, which is beyond a joke, I must tell you. If only I can get to it. There we go. Let me just share that. So with all this scanning, which is driving me mad, to be honest, coronavirus hit. And I realized that, you know, whereas I do teach partially online, I also wanted to find a way to reach out to students who are in different time zones, who are facing maybe stuff at home that makes life difficult for them in those couple of hours that we do the class. There's so many distractions, the cat, the dog, the boyfriend, the father, whatever it is. So I started thinking I could use these scans that I'm making and annotate them with my terrible handwriting. That's why the right-hand side facing page where it'll all be typed out. But it's a way to discuss photographs, to tell anecdotes around photography, to speak about composition, art, journalism, all these kind of things. So I've been printing out just on photocopies, thank you BU, of these pictures, and then drawing on them and talking about them, that they are a guide. This will be a terrific help to me, I think, in teaching my students, both the journalism students and the photography students. Let me just stop the share. But I also think I'm going to definitely make a textbook from it, or a book, but I think it'll be primarily a textbook. So one just keeps regenerating the work into other things. The real purpose of scanning the pictures was to do a volume of photographic books, which I'm still going to do. It's just those are very long and slow projects. But if it's key to do stuff that you love, that you can stick with over time, that you have the energy and the interest in regenerating forms of product and income from it in different contexts, and not all of them pay. Some pay, some don't, but they're part of who you are. And if your work doesn't represent who you are as a person, I don't know how you can last. I think you just get exhausted and you drop out. But if it's something that you're passionate and care about, that is more than just the photography or the writing or the PR or whatever it is that you do, the filmmaking, if it's an extension of your life and your understanding of the world, I think these things are sustainable and can be hugely important in person and your career. That's it.
Thanks, Greg. And Greg touches on a point that answers the first question that we have in the Q&A from Emerson, who said, how do I stay motivated as a freelancer? And I'm going to talk a little bit about my career and my life's work has been studying the craft of writing and practicing the craft. So I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes briefly, and then we can take some more questions. But I think when you listen to all three panelists, Pegeen, Mary Jane, and Greg, if you do not choose stories that you're passionate about, then you will lose your motivation. You will not be able to finish projects. You will not see projects come to fruition. It's totally like the first rule is the only way you're going to be motivated is if it's a story that you would tell for free, a book you would write for nothing. And then hopefully later, with your passion totally invested in that work, it will come to fruition and you'll be able, it'll help you make a career, a living as a freelancer. I'm going to share my screen just a couple times with simple images. So this past spring, I taught this new class, J0502 Freelancing, for the first time, and I will be teaching it again summer 2 over Zoom. And you know, I'd like to say the semester is over, but it's not, because with freelancers and with these very highly motivated, passionate students that I had, they're just starting to finish their queries and their third stories, and they're starting to sell their stories, and I'm still reading their stories. I'm still reading their stories because I'm passionate about storytelling, even though the semester is quote unquote over, and they're still working on it, even though some of them have graduated in the last few days because they're passionate about the subject matter that they chose. So I think it's worthwhile for me to share a few things that are at the foundation of my teaching, no matter what I'm teaching, what kind of writing I'm teaching. And these are a combination of habits of mind and tools. And if you don't have these habits of mind and you can't access these tools or develop these tools, you're going to have difficulty making your way as a writer. So the first and most important habit of mind for a freelance writer is, and for any writer, but certainly for freelancers, is Occam's razor. Do not multiply entities beyond necessity. And for students in my audience today, I know like they have heard this many, many times. The reason why you need to be efficient and economical as a freelancer, not wasting any time, not multiplying entities beyond necessity, is because you have to do deep sort of research, formulate a story idea, craft a query, start writing a draft, and no one's paying you. It's going to take you anywhere from a few days to a couple months to formulate a story that's worth sending out. And if you don't put enough effort into it, it won't sell. Therefore, you have to pick something that you're not going to ever get bored with, that you're going to feel invested in the whole time, just for your own delight in learning the story and telling the story. Now, the second set of things I teach in my writing practice is tools. And the first and most important tool, another thing that students have heard from me very often, is every writing genre has a structure. Master the structure and you master the genre. So in freelancing, just this class, teaching this class, they are tackling or starting to become sort of aware of different structures: the news feature, the opinion piece, the trend story, the film or book review, even book proposals, which I have written and which I have collected from other writers. And we covered all of that in this class. So they realized that as a freelancer, the more tools that are in your Swiss Army knife, the more kinds of things you can write, the more work you can get. The thing that cuts across all those genres, and I have published novels and short fiction, as well as like lengthy journalistic pieces. The thing that connects them all, that unifies them all, is the importance of the first 4 paragraphs of anything that you write. Because think of how important the first 4 paragraphs are in anything that you read. If it doesn't compel you to move forward, the only successful test of writing is, do I want to turn the page? So the clarity and unity of those first 4 paragraphs have to bind together as a whole. I call it the Lego effect. They have to like snap together in a way that makes you want to continue. Take this share away. Makes you want to continue your efforts. I have one more thing I will share if I can, related to how we did it, how we sort of covered developing a passion in the first incarnation of the freelance class. Let's see if I have it. So this is a document that I created for the class called Developing Your Beat. And I say that mastering your beat is critical to developing your brand as a storyteller, and having more than one beat gives you more flexibility, more story options, more utility as a content provider. But what are your beats? And then I gave them a whole list of prompts, and we spent a whole class free writing and giving impromptu, like stand-up talks about our answers to these questions. List any training or orientations that you've had that lasted 10 hours or more. And I list a whole bunch of them: CPR, emergency first aid, RA training, campus tour guide, lifeguard training, flight lessons, etc. Musical instruments, woodworking, pottery, martial arts, dance, film and TV, camping, national parks, hunting and fishing, and so on. Even things that are practical for students. How do I find an apartment in Boston? How do I choose my professors? How do I meet people with similar interests? How do I find a free meal in the city? Can I surf New England in winter? How can I find an outdoor adventure in the city? So by going through these exercises, and the last one, shadowing an interesting person, I give a whole array of them. Students immediately latched on to one or two things in those lists and said, okay, this is what I'm going to write about this term. Is that okay? And I obviously said yes, because that is like at the Grundrisse, the groundwork of my teaching. So I see a bunch more questions in chat, so let me get to some of those.
I've been reading these questions. They're very good.
Yes.
Really specific. We should try to get back to them, right?
Yeah, we're going to do that right now. So Mary Jane, why don't you take this question from Kaylee? What's the best way to promote yourself as an aspiring TV writer? Should I make a website and upload my scripts online? Should I make short videos to demonstrate my writing?
This is Kaylee.
Yes.
Yeah, Kaylee, definitely do your own work. And you are probably much more social. Well, Josh says Instagram, or at least two of the three main outlets. The rule of thumb is 1 minute. Every minute that you spend making your film, spend 2 minutes promoting it. So, you know, take jobs while you're getting your work out there, but definitely make your own website and make your own work to demonstrate your writing. Absolutely.
This next question might be good for Greg. It doesn't really apply to what I do. I don't know if Greg, if you've encountered this, do you recommend freelancers have professional liability insurance? Do you have any insurance related to that?
No, not liability insurance. It's too expensive, and it's normally property based. It's normally linked to a property. I think you need insurance if you're covering conflict, and that's also very expensive. There used to be short-term insurance you could take out 1 week at a time with a French company whose name escapes me at the moment. But you need personal insurance, just liability, the normal, not liability, for theft and for personal injury, that you are covered in general. This is why you have to make your work pay, because these things are expensive. Insurance, equipment, telephones, transport, a car, all these things, rent in Boston, all these things cost a lot of money. And if you're going to be viable, you've got to be able to pay for these things and not live hand to mouth. And that's before you start establishing a life. It's tricky, but I wouldn't worry about liability unless you're making something like a feature film or a documentary where you're working on a site. Then you have to look for liability for that specific work situation.
Pegeen, why don't you take this question, and others can chime in too. This is from Steve. How can you best juggle all aspects of freelancing? For example, pitching new business, billing clients, creating content, etc., when you're a one-person show?
Yeah, the simple answer to that is you work a lot. oftentimes in freelance, you're burning both ends of the candle. And in one respect, that's one of the pros of freelancing is it's just you and your clients, and you don't have those middle layers of, you know, ACDs and CDs and account people and whatnot. But on the other hand, it just means that you are doing all those things. So, you know, I think ideally what happens is you start with projects, you get some projects, and you turn them into clients. And there's a big difference to me because projects come and go and clients kind of stay. So once you start to have clients, you can manage your time a little bit better. But I mean, you know, most of the time, if I'm doing billing, I'm doing it like on a Friday evening, you know, so you just have to assume that you're going to have a schedule that sometimes is kind of cool and a little more open, but sometimes you're just going to be working a lot of hours.
Yeah, I think when you say, how do I do it? Have no other interests. That's one way of doing it. Just do that all the time, which is kind of how I go about it. I don't have a TV. I'll answer this one from Wallace. And this time I'm assuming many creators are seeking out, I keep losing that question. Okay. And this time I'm assuming many creators are seeking out freelance work. Do you suggest we tackle small and local jobs rather than larger jobs? As a writer, and I work with a lot of young writers, and one of them has asked a question here, which we'll come to shortly. If you don't have a lot of clips, then you should try smaller jobs. You should try to get into local publications. You should start developing a list of clips and a list of clients. If you have them, if you already have a bunch of clips, then you progressively move up the ladder to more prestigious publications. Jack asks, what are the ways that I could get my writing and my work out there while currently at home under lockdown? Greg kind of touched on this, and Greg, maybe you could pick up on this again, where you have this archive and you can go back and you can create material even though you may not be able to get out in the field again right now.
I think we all experience so much more than we produce work-wise. And I think as ghastly as this pandemic is, for many of us, it's a chance to really be introspective and think about what we want to do and how we want to do it. A lot of my students who were kind of, with respect, all over the place in terms of their aesthetic and their ideas about how they wanted to work, have found that this has allowed them the time to really be introspective and think about what they want to spend their time with. And they are starting to produce work that's close to their hearts, that's very interesting. And in fact, my lockdown and shutdown stuff material from my students was astonishingly good, really exceptional. Yes. So I think there's a need for material. There's a need for new material out there because people aren't producing a lot. So you can, as Jay says, you mine your archive and you mine other people's archives. People have got time to talk to you. So take advantage of it. Build up those contacts. You don't need to have that physical contact at this moment, but you build it up that you're ready to go once you're allowed to or able to.
Pegeen, why don't you take this question from Noemi? I was wondering if anyone had tips or good systems for working from home and self-discipline, especially with work that hasn't sold yet.
Well, I don't know why I never really had too much of an issue. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I get just so distracted. I go do the laundry and stuff. I don't really know what the tips are except to just treat it like it's a job. Set up a space where, you know, I have an office here. And so when this whole thing hit, I was like, I spend a ton of time in here anyway. So it's just my workspace. And then with work that hasn't sold yet, that's not quite my area as much. I mean, again, for advertising, it's a little less oftentimes about sort of creating that project and trying to sell it. It's almost more of a reactionary thing of fulfilling the projects and the needs of clients that are coming in. So I would just say, you know, just treat it like it's a job. Don't treat it like, oh, I'm home and I'm dabbling in this. You know, set time frames when you're going to be in the office and stick to them.
Here's another good one for you, Pegeen. when we do creative work, how do we balance the requests from our partner organizations and the aesthetics tastes of our own?
That's a great question. So I'm going to give you the honest answer, which is actually not that different than if you're working in an advertising agency, which is, you know, all you can do is do the best and most aesthetic and most creative work that you can and present it. And if they choose to go along with it, great. And if they don't, they don't. And that's just the way it goes. And it's the way it goes in agencies, almost even more so because, again, as I mentioned before, you have all those layers you have to get up through before you even get to the client. I guess the good thing about freelancing is you're going straight from what you're producing to the client. Have I found that my clients, my freelance clients, have always gone with the most aesthetic and the things that I love the most? Nope, not at all. So you just deal with it. If you want to be kind of like, you know, a prima donna creative about it, you can walk away from the client, but you know, then it just depends on how you're treating this. If you're treating this as your source of income, just like in an agency, you're just gonna have to be flexible and, you know, come to compromises.
Greg, how do you pitch news photography and get seen at the start of your career? I assume that's from Caitlin.
I saw that one. Caitlin, depends what you want to do. A lot of people use Instagram and social media to be seen, but the problems with these fora is that they own the copyright through the terms of service, which are dreadful. I would say watermark your work, that it can't be used without people positively defrauding you and stealing the work, and do stuff that will make people see it, but then also link it to a personal website where people can dwell and look at your stuff, where you can project your vision of how you're going to cover news or whatever your longer term career plan is. And also make sure you're out there calling people. This whole thing about what Mary Jane said about 2 minutes of social media and publicizing your work for every 1 minute of actual work, that's very accurate. So, you know, you've got to promote your work, and you promote it in a way that suits your personality. You know, not everyone's the Barnum Brothers, and, you know, or not everyone's, I forget the completely reclusive writer, which also is a way of attracting people, you know, as long as you've already done the work. So push your work and keep doing new work, fresh work, keep regenerating, even if it's old stuff that's repackaging at this time, just keep making new stuff out there. Let people feel your personality through your work.
Rachel, I'll answer this one. I'm interested in doing freelance editing, as in writing, not film. How can I get into this field? I'm not an editor, but I know lots of editors, and I know Rachel, so get in touch with me and I'll get you in touch with some editors and they can give you some tips. This question is for me from Luciano. The question is for me. Does it say, how would you go about writing about how the coronavirus has affected a certain beat without sounding like everybody else who is writing about the effects of the coronavirus? I'm not sure what your beat is and how it is affected, although almost all beats are affected. I know I'm in conversations with editors I know that have asked me for work, and my beat is outdoors. So I have possibilities, but they're limited, and I need to work those over with, for safety reasons, I need to work those over with the editors. So I assume it might be something like that for you too. Sebastian, while freelancing, who do you recommend sending your work for feedback and improvement? If you're a writer, send it to any, you know, professional writers that you know. If you're my former student, and you may be, like, send it to me and I'll help you out. Pegeen, can you speak more to setting price, negotiating rates to make sure we value ourselves as freelancers?
That's a good question, and it's one that it could get pretty involved in answering. And I don't know, Zoe, what stage you're at, or if you're in school or out of school or seasoned. But I mean, a very quick answer is we tell students if they're just getting out of school, their rate is probably going to start somewhere around like $20, $25 an hour, and hopefully move up, you know, pretty quickly from there. I mean, if you're talking to seasoned freelancers, they're making hundreds and hundreds of dollars an hour. So That's really going to depend. And it also, I mean, again, I won't get into the super long answer, but you need to start thinking about things about whether you're billing by the hour or whether you're billing by the project. And there's a lot to learn about estimating a project and understanding sort of the different stages that it'll go through and understanding how many revisions the client may want to make. So it's a big question. And actually, if you want me to follow up in more detail with you after this, I can do that. But yes, quick answer.
Thanks, Pegeen. The dean is signaling me that we're out of time and we're going to have to end the session. So I'd like to turn it over to Mariette.
Thanks a million, Jane. Thanks a million to the speakers. You all did an amazing job. I learned a lot of things, like, just Pegeen was telling us, make something and get started. Among Mary Jane's lessons, I heard that, we should take every job, and that how can I help is a key phrase. Greg told us about spending the time and being passionate, how he got past being passionate, but inexperienced. He invested the time. And from Jay, I heard a lot about following your passion. If you would do it for free, that might be a good clue that others might be interested as well. So I just wanted to thank everybody again. Remind you that there are other events which you can find on the COM website. Next week, we have one about your career and developing your career. I hope you can join us then. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Thanks so much for joining.